Hello, it's John Heaton, and I'm going to do 1975 now, and of my hypothetical Beatles album series. Gets a little bit tricky here because John didn't put out an album, so I've had to include some stuff. Well, he did put out rock and roll, of course, so I've drawn from that, and also a couple of hangouts from Walls and Bridges. We had Venus and Mars from Paul that year, Extra Texture from George. Nothing from Ringo, so I've done a couple of hangovers from Goodnight Vienna. So I think I've opened the album with Venus and Mars Rock Show. I don't really see how I could put that anywhere else on the album. It's a superb opener. Obviously opened the Venus and Mars album and opened the tour, the 75-76 tour. Just a brilliant medley and wonderful album opener, brilliant melody. Followed that up with a Ringo song, No No Song, written by Hoyt Axton. There's a couple of cover songs on this album, which is perhaps unusual but for a Beatles album, or a hypothetical Beatles album, but of course in the early days they did do cover versions of stuff. But after Help, they didn't. So anyway, No No Song, whichever way you look at it, Ringo makes the song his own and does a superb version, and it's hilarious. So that's that. Tired of Midnight Blue from George, one of the highlights of Extra Texture, is next. Extra Texture, misunderstood album and underrated, very soulful, and yeah. So that's that. Boney Maroney from John, from the Rock and Roll album. And it's interesting, I've chosen, for this album, I've chosen the Phil Spector produced material rather than the stuff he did after Walls and Bridges. I think it's on the whole better, not completely, but Boney Maroney is a superb rocker. I know it was recorded in the back end of '73, so it's a bit delayed coming out on the '75 album, and as it was with the Rock and Roll album, of course, delayed. But it's a tour de force vocally, and a great Larry Williams, I think it is, song. Then we've got You Gave Me the Answer from Paul, complete change of mood. He does this one superbly on Wings Over America. The version on the album is great, if a little reserved. But I'm not going to nitpick, it's a great track. Then I've followed that with another George track, this guitar, Can't Keep From Crying, a kind of sequel to While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Again, another highlight from Extra Texture. And he did another version of this in the late 80s, and it turned up as a bonus track on the CD of Extra Texture, so check that one out with Dave Stewart. And yeah, Dave Stewart. And I think that latter version brought out the melody more, whereas the Extra Texture version maybe didn't. And the guitar work is decent, so that's a good one from George. Then side one closes with Letting Go from Paul. It's interesting how I've opened and closed side one with the same songs that opened and closed side one of Venus and Mars. I think it's a great side closer, Letting Go, and I'm really pleased that Paul has started to do this one live in recent years, because it really is a highlight of his whole 70s catalogue, if not his whole solo career. Brilliant. Flip it over to side two, and we're opening with the great George track, You. Again, I can't really think where else to put that track. It's such a superb opener. And again, this song was recorded back in '71 when Ronnie Spector was supposed to sing the lead, and that session was aborted. So Phil Spector is producing, and if I remember rightly, you've got people like Carl Raddle, Leon Russell on this track. Brilliant, simple lyrically, but it's a good message. Then listen to What the Man Said, the absolute masterpiece from Venus and Mars, and this, for some odd reason, was left off Wings' Greatest when that compilation came out in '78, but it is one of Wings' greatest. He kind of made up for it in '87 when he promoted All the Best, and he performed this song on the BBC on the Wogan show. It's no less than one of Paul's top 5 or 10 tracks since he left the Beatles, in my opinion. It's just sublime, lyrically very uplifting. Kind of good song to play on a sunny morning driving in the car, I think. Then Old Dirt Road from John, with lovely guitar from Jesse Davis, and George would have done a good job on that as well, had it been a Beatles track. Co-written with Nielsen, this one. And then a controversial choice next, and not all of you are going to agree, but I've gone with the Ringo track from Goodnight Vienna, Husbands and Wives, the Roger Miller song. I just think it's, it's sentimental. It's, some people probably think Ringo can't sing it very well, but I think it's very touching and very moving. And particularly as he was going through a divorce at the time, the lyrics kind of ring true. Then I followed it with a John track, Fame, which obviously he famously co-wrote with David Bowie and Carlos Alomar, and turned up on Bowie's Young Americans album. But I think had the Beatles been together, they would have definitely tried this track, and maybe Bowie would have guested on the Beatles album the way Clapton guested on the White Album. It's a funky track, and John was very proud of it, rightly so, and it's about the last thing we heard from him before 1980, other than the track he did for Roger Gravure, Cooking, the following year, 76. So that's that, and then All By Myself from Ringo is next, the opener of side 2 from Goodnight Vienna, and John's on guitar on this track, on the album. And Richard Perry is on bass vocals, in great form, and I love it. Again, a very uplifting track. If you're feeling depressed, often you turn to a Ringo record to make you, to cheer yourself up. I do anyway. Then I've closed the album with Just Because, another one of the Spector produced tracks from rock and roll. It wasn't a song that John was very familiar with, but Spector asked him to do it, and it's a great ballad and wonderfully sung by John, really impassioned vocal. So it's a bit unusual to have so many cover versions on a Beatles album, I suppose. 1, 2, 3, 4 I think I've got. But I think it flows well. I've got 4 John, 4 Paul, 3 George and 3 Ringo on this particular hypothetical Beatles album. The bonus tracks, I've got Grey Cloudy Lies from George, a lovely sad ballad from Extra Texture, Call Me Back Again from Paul, and the B-side, Move Over Miss Hell from John, the B-side of Stand By Me. So that's 1975. I'm going to take a break for the second half of the 70s and come back with a double album representing 1979-80. Okay, so I'll be posting that next. Thank you for watching. See you next time.